Hello, everyone. Welcome to Nothing Media. We have Richard Sylvester and Don Garland for their initial The Wind of Freedom. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
And if you have any questions, please type it on Facebook, YouTube. If you want to join the Zoom, click on the link. We have a few people here. I'm just going to ask you guys to do introduction, and I'm going to hide myself.
Okay, introduction now. Yep. Okay, so I'll say just a little bit about non-duality. Non-duality can be summed up in all sorts of ways. I'm just going to say it's the seeing through the self. It's the seeing that there is no separate self. So there seems to be, we could say the normal way or the ordinary way of seeing is that there seems to be, let's say, two things or two entities. So that's duality. And one of these things, one of these entities is my sense of me as a person as separate. And the other thing is, if you like, everything else. In other words, the world that I move through. So that's the kind of normal experience, we could say, the normal experience of duality. I am separate from the world that I live in, and I move through that world, and I have to negotiate with that world. I have to negotiate, of course, with objects and events, but most of all, I have to negotiate with those sometimes difficult other entities known as other people. This can cause all sorts of problems as well as all sorts of delights. And we may put a great deal of effort into attempting to solve the problems of duality in many, many different ways. So the suggestion here today is that there is another and a radical way of seeing, I'll put it, a radical way of seeing, and that is that that sense of separation, that I am separate from the world through which I move, can simply collapse. And when it collapses, then it can simply be recognized that there is no separation because there's no separate person to be experiencing separation. And then what there is simply everything that's happening, or whatever is happening. Then all there is it's sometimes quite often summed up as nothing and everything. And that is non-duality, the disappearance of the sense that the person is a separate entity, and the recognition that that was never the case, and there is and has always been simply what is happening. And that can have huge implications, some of which we may discuss this afternoon or not, we'll see. But I'm going to leave this kind of general introduction at that for now, and we'll see what comes up during this session. Do you want to add to that?
I'll just say, so life can seem, when you're identified, can seem very dull in a sense, and you're always looking for some sort of distraction, some kind of thrill, or something to make it okay. And it's always, you always feel like it's to do with the mind somehow. And then somehow it's realized that all that energy that creates that sense of self is just a mind-based thing. And suddenly when the identification falls away from the mind, the energy that's absolutely wrapped up in that is absolutely freed. So everything becomes alive again. Like perhaps you might remember that as a child, where is everything you look at becomes full of life, energized, revitalized, and entirely absorbing. So all the problems, everything that's been a struggle in life, suddenly your absorption into what's happening is just a total relief, and it brings a total peace. there's often a second event, you know, the first one, just seeing the emptiness of everything, that there's no one here, there's nothing. And that can happen without the seeing of love. So that can bring about a kind of relaxation, but it can be quite stagnant as well, until love is seen, which is it's an impersonal love, which is a joy, which is a total celebration of life in a way. It absolutely blows you away. It is nothing you can imagine, nothing compares to it, nothing you've ever experienced. Nothing comes close to it at all. It is the absolute. It is seen everywhere. Everywhere reflects that beauty, that love, and that intimacy with all life. And there is an in-loveness with everything that exists, and that includes, I don't know, the glass of water, the sky, the trees, and the. So it is seen when the self itself is seen through this. So there's no one here. There's no one there. There's no other. So there's just this seamless joy. This and everything is somehow that restores. You see the sacred in everything as well. So that might have been sought. You might have been in religion or something, or looking for the sacred, or the, you know, trying to find what is holy, what is perfect, and suddenly that is actually seen. It's a quality that is intrinsic to life that you weren't seeing. So the sacred dimension is beauty, and I think that's what so many artists have tried to capture as well. It's just stunning. It's there. You don't need art, you don't need anything, you just see it. And it's the stillness of that, the stillness, because the mind falls away, it loses its power. Even if the mind doesn't go entirely, it doesn't have that same kind of, it normally creates a veil, and suddenly there's just this beauty and stillness, which seems to be a quality in itself that lends beauty to everything. So initially, after such an awakening, nothing seems to be needed at all to bring fulfillment. So there's no longer seeking for a story, seeking for resolution of a conflict, or any kind of need of anything. And all you want to do basically is to sit, which is the most perfect thing in the world, to sit and particularly in nature, that's where I've always felt it most strongly, and just to look, and yeah, so everything is restored, and that can go on for some time, in an intensity. It becomes more normal over time. It becomes quite, you know, it becomes very ordinary, but it's, yeah, so that is the end of seeking, and yeah. So that's, yeah, nothing and everything. That's it. So, yeah.
Thank you. I have a question from William. William, go ahead and mute yourself.
Thanks, Emerson. Hi, Richard and Dawn.
Hi.
I love the introduction. It was really good. Because I had a question, but I think maybe part of what Dawn said might answer. The question I have is, when the sense of self falls away, is that the end of all expectations for things to go well, or for things to go a certain way?
It's not so much the end of that. Like, it doesn't matter how things go, like, in the same way. So you might want them to go a certain way, but it's okay how they go. So you're kind of, there's no kind of disappointment, and you don't expect things to be other than how they go, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it's more like that, I think, you know. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I could throw in the word, you know, it's a kind of natural acceptance. I think we have to be a bit wary of that word, even though I'm using it, because particularly those of us who've perhaps spent time on spiritual paths, and so there's an awful lot that's made of acceptance, and it turns into a task. You know, yet another thing I have to do on my spiritual path is become more accepting. And here I am, if I grit my teeth and clench my fist hard enough, then perhaps I really will become enormously accepting. So it's nothing to do with that. It's just like there's a kind of natural acceptance of what is, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's neutral, because it's seen that somehow, you know, I, the person, am not in that. And so there's a kind of, a sort of letting go. That was supposed to be the sound of a lovely, relaxing sigh there, a kind of, you know, letting go.
but in saying that, is also, in some ways things do flow more easy. So it's, you know, you don't struggle so much to kind of accomplish things in a way, you know. So there's not the same, because you're not stuck in the kind of ego worry about things as well. So there is a natural flow that seems to arise as well. So
yeah, I think the expectations that I always project are about what I need to become fulfilled, and obviously you've said that falls away with the self, but then obviously an immense amount of control. Well, the idea I have control, I need to do these things in order to guarantee a certain result in the future. But what you've both said answers it perfectly.
yeah, just be yourself. Yeah, that's all you need to be. You know, it just seems easier to do that. You know, just and if something doesn't work out, then it seems much easier to so what, kind of more of a so what about that as well. You know, you're not so invested in it. You know.
Yeah, I think the other thing as well, in regards to putting an expectation that I need to have fulfilled, is so that I avoid certain emotions if things don't go the way that I think I need them to go. And so would you be able to say anything about it when the sense of self falls away, how emotions kind of, they're not pushed away, would you say?
Yeah, well, they're yeah, well, they don't seem, there's no avoiding of that, but you know, and everybody's different, because in my case there's an awful lot of emotional neutrality anyway, so there's nothing in a sense to avoid, or like when suffering arises, it doesn't stay. So it can arise, but it just doesn't, because it seems like it's okay to, like everything seems like appropriate to feel. So it's not like there's no reason to push it away, because it's very natural. So you're just with, you know, you're with that emotion because it's natural to what's happened. And so something like that, I think.
Yeah, I think I guess the sense of being a person is like, these emotions I shouldn't be feeling. In regards to what you were saying about there's nothing that's inappropriate to feel or unnatural to feel. Yeah.
Yeah, and the negative emotions, and the negative emotions are really good as well, because they're good at getting your boundaries, and they give you information. All that stuff is actually good, and so yeah, there's often a pushing away of those, and actually they're very useful. So yeah.
Going back to what you're saying about the sense of control as well, it's the seeing that the one who seems to have control doesn't exist. So what happens, happens. So whether it's perceived as good, bad, negative, or whatever, it's likely to be perceived as flowing and not having anything to do with me, not in the sense that there is a me who's detached from it, but purely in the sense that the me that I once believed that I was is now seen through.
Yeah. I can't even imagine, like, there's been glimpses of this, and obviously I can't remember exactly what that was like, but it's impossible for me to imagine life without the need for control. I guess that's just something that the sense of self will either fall or it won't, and until it does, I suppose there's always going to be that need of control, isn't there, with the feeling that I'm separate, and there's things that I need to control.
But of course, that sense of need of control is always an illusion, whether it's seen through or not. It is always an illusion, you know, that there is some, I mean, it's one of the most fundamental things about separation, about being a separate person, if you like, that I feel I have this precious thing called free will, through which I can exercise control over myself, to some extent control over events and maybe even other people. So it's very, very, very fundamental to our sense of self that I am in control, with both the gifts and the dangers and the threats that bring. So it's pretty fundamental. When that's seen through, it's part of the shock. It is very much part of the shock. Oh my God, there never was ever anyone here who actually controlled anything, there never was anyone here who ever made a choice. What's more, there never was anyone here who ever had a thought or had a feeling. That was all simply happening.
Lovely. Thank you for the answers. That was great.
I'm just going to move something here on the screen that we're looking at.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a question come up. It's lucky I had something in front of the chat line. So a question has come up here from Ray Martin. I'm really confused about free will. Can both of you elaborate on that? Do you want to tackle that first?
Free will, that's a biggie. Well,
it's quite a biggie, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's seen that there's no one to do anything, but at the same time, that doesn't stop, you from being able to do things it doesn't actually change the experience much, in the sense that, if you need to change things, you use your intelligence and, do what is necessary. But it's just, yeah, it's seen much more that things happen spontaneously as well. So there isn't that energetic, like you say, that sense of control tends to dissolve as well. So, yeah, free will seems to me, I don't know, a big issue for people, but it doesn't change the experience and the intimacy with life and your relationship to life, in a sense, is just as, if not more profound, because you enter into relationships much more deeply than you did previously, in my experience. Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's more like there's more like a merging with others when you're engaged in relationship or you're engaged in friendship and stuff. There's much more of a merging and stuff. So there's nothing about this that's negative or detracts from the experience of the character. It's much more intimate. It's much more lovely, because it can sound really awful, the free will thing, I think, from if you're, coming from a sense of self, but actually it's really beautiful.
Because I think it's one of the things that the mind most resists about this. And in fact, in a way, if we want to start an argument, perhaps a very loud argument about non-duality, or even simply about life itself, then to deny free will, to say that free will is an illusion, is a very good way of starting an argument, because it tends to really, people tend to sense that as really kind of like an attack on one of the things which is felt to be most precious about being a person, and about life itself, that I have this thing through which I can exercise some kind of control over that other thing that I talked about right at the beginning, that world, that separate world through which I move. So in a way, when that sense of self collapses and it's seen that there isn't a separation, there isn't a separate me that exists in a separate world, in a way the issue of free will kind of becomes almost irrelevant. But don't expect the mind to accept that. The mind very often clings to the idea of free will, very, 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 very desperately. And in a way, by the way, there's no one here actually saying, it's not that there's anyone here saying there's no free will. It's rather that what's being said here is there is no person. So the idea of free will doesn't even really arise. The possibility of free will doesn't even arise, because there is no one who could exercise it. So the whole thing of free will, it just really collapses. And if if you've been taking an interest in this from a kind of mind level, it's obvious there's an awful lot of debate out there. There are a lot of books about free will now. There's an awful lot of debate on YouTube about it, and some of it gets very, very, very heated indeed. If you want to see a heated debate on free will, watch Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett lock horns about it, because they take absolutely opposing sides. And I mean, you know, I find that debate quite interesting, actually. I find, you know, the arguments quite interesting, but in a way they're also irrelevant, because if this is directly seen, you know, if non-duality is directly seen, sense of self is seen through, then free will just becomes a, I'm just going to say, a non-issue. It becomes irrelevant, because it's seen, as I say, not so much that there is no free will, but that there is no one who could possibly own free will or operate it, if you like. Yeah. Anything more on that, or
no,
should we look at Ray's next? So so Ray Martin has put up here now, are we meat robots then, and are we in a simulation if there is no free will and if it's an illusion? Do you want to?
I don't know. Maybe we are. Who knows? I don't know what we're in. But no, I mean, because like I say, it doesn't destroy anything. That it, you know, because it, you know, what we take for life is so small. Like that sort of, we're so self-absorbed, and then suddenly that self-absorption ends. It's like it is a total freedom. So, you know, like the question of free will, I mean, it's not something even think about. Like it's, you know, it still matters to the character stuff that happens. I mean, it's still, there's an intimacy with this, there's an intimacy, you know, with the rest of life. So there's really nothing. It is not a loss. Like it you know, it's only a loss of that identification. It's an absolute gain. It's a gain of the world. It's a gain of life. You know, you become one with life. It's beautiful in that respect. And the joy is, you know, it's nothing that any human relationship can bring you. You know, it's that love. It depends on nothing. You know, so yeah.
And the sense of choice can still arise. The sense of decision making can still arise. You know, in the restaurant, will it be the fish? Will it be the meat? The fish, the meat, the fish, the meat. Yeah. I'll have the meat. That seems to be like a choice. It seems to be like a decision. It's just that there's no one actually making that. As to whether we are meat robots, I've used quite a lot of phrases and similes to try to describe, you know, what this really is and what that really is. And other speakers and writers have some phrases that have been used, you know, the divine puppet, psychophysical organism. That's not a very romantic phrase, but nevertheless, meat robot I've never come across before, and I have to say it doesn't particularly appeal to me, but yeah, fine, if it sounds right for you, then go with it. Are we in a simulation? I have absolutely no idea, and what difference does it make? The point is, in a way, you know, we are in a simulation. We're not in a simulation. We are subject to the laws of God. We are not subject to the laws of God. We are on the Buddha's path to enlightenment. We've come off the Buddha's path to enlightenment. The point is, these are all stories. You know, these are all constructs that the mind makes to try to make sense of its dilemma, and the basic dilemma is separation. So because we seem to live in separation, and because that's uncomfortable and difficult, we make up all sorts of stories about the fact that this maybe is about something and it's going somewhere, and I'm playing maybe some quite important part in it going somewhere. So this is somehow a story which is developing towards a goal, whether that goal is ultimate enlightenment or resting at last in the arms of God, or realizing I'm in the matrix and breaking out of it. I mean, who cares? I mean, they're all stories. So yes, maybe we're in a simulation, maybe we're not, maybe we're fulfilling the will of God, maybe we're not, and maybe we're on the Buddha's eightfold noble path, and maybe we're not. Ultimately, none of that can be known. All of that is just an entertainment for the mind. Oh, there's another question here. Should we move on? We ready?
All right, okay.
Oh, they're coming in thick and fast on the chat. Some speakers, this is from some sort of code name. Some speakers say that there is no such thing as mind. Others talk about using the mind as a tool for seeing that one is not in control of his life. Can this help in a way to give up? Thank you. So I think the heart of that is, can using the mind as a tool for seeing that no one is in control help in any way?
Well, the mind is just the thought stream. There is not, which is seen to be, when you wake up as well, like when awakening happens, the mind seems to lose its energy. I mean, it seems to be, it's almost like a death to that. It seems very flat, and quite other. You mean it, so it just, it loses all its kind of power in a way. So it's a strange one. When it happened to me, I just thought everybody must have realized that. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the mind and you examine the mind, you can see that it's happening spontaneously. I think you can see that. It doesn't stop identification, but you can certainly, through meditation and stuff, and really look at the mind and see how it operates, see how it functions, see the kind of movements it makes. And I think it gives you some sort of insight into what's going on. But that actually, the mysterious thing is how that identification falls away, of course, because that's the thing that no one can make that happen. But yeah, I mean, it's no harm it's very useful to look at that and to learn more about how it functions, because they're all quite similar in a sense. Once you kind of get a sense of how your own mind operates, you get an idea of what mind is, and it's actually really quite powerless. You don't need it. There's knowing anyway without mind. Without mind, everything is known. When the mind falls away, when you're in absolute stillness, mental inner, stillness, there's no need of any thought stream whatsoever to navigate life. There really isn't. In that, there is more room for insights and for a new thought, because you're not going through the endless churning of rumination and the rest of it. And actually thought tends to be, because normally thought has a negative bias as well. And I think after awakening, it can often have a kind of positive bias or a neutral bias, but it's, yeah. So I think
Yeah, I mean, it can certainly seem, for the person that the mind may be a wonderful, wonderful tool for exploring all sorts of things, including this, wonderful thing, whatever we might think of it as, a spiritual path or awakening or non-duality or whatever. But, of course that collapses when it's seen that actually, the mind as an entity, doesn't exist. It is, as you've been saying, it is, it's a thought stream, and it's a thought stream which is emerging, if you like, out of nothing and falling back into nothing. So it doesn't really have anything to do essentially with what I, in separation, believe myself to be. So I might have all sorts of very, very powerful beliefs that I have this precious thing called a mind, which I can do all sorts of wonderful things with, including searching for liberation. But that's all again blown apart. I mean, just a split second of disappearance of the person can blow that apart completely. And kind of paradoxically, the energy which seems to create the mind can then operate far more freely. and it can become more pleasurable, more exciting, less neurotic. It can do, yeah.
Yeah.
Another one here, another question from Angela Lingham. Oh dear. What is the difference between this communication and what is discussed in Buddhism called anatta, or no self?
It's a good one for you, Buddhism.
I'll have a go at that, shall I? Yes. I once read a book on Buddhism. Well, I'm going to say something very simple to start with and then maybe make it a little bit more complicated. I would say the simplest thing to say is this is identical. You know, there's no difference. So there you go. Maybe it's the reason why it's, I mean, some people may disagree with this, but I'd say maybe it's the reason why it is much easier to see parallels between this communication of non-duality and Buddhism, between, say, this communication of non-duality and fundamentalist Christianity. Let's say it's much more difficult to find connections there, but I would say that what in Buddhism is called anatta, or no self, I speak by no means as an expert on Buddhism, but nevertheless they're absolutely identical. It's the same thing. However, there is a but coming. There is a but coming. For the last 2,500 apparent years, Buddhists have been arguing, and sometimes pretty ferociously, about what no self actually means. So on a mind level, you know, when it comes to concepts and things like this, this can just generate as much disputation, as much argument, as much hot air as in Christianity, the nature of the Trinity. I'm not going to go into the nature of the Trinity. I'm sure we'll all be very relieved to hear that. But learned divines have been arguing about the nature of the Trinity for nearly 2,000 years. In some cases, they've been burning each other to death over the disagreements. And Buddhists have been arguing about the true nature of no self for 2,500 years, and occasionally have come to blows over it as well. So that's what happens when the mind gets involved. So as far as this is concerned, you know, no self is something that's seen or it's not seen. You know, as an idea, no self really has no value, except that it can generate a lot of interesting evenings, perhaps. You know, if we're fed up with watching EastEnders, then we could have a lovely discussion about no self. But from the level of the mind, it won't get us anywhere. But when it's seen, it's just seen. It's the absolute heart and basis of what we're talking about. You know, either self seems to be there or it's gone.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, that's about right.
About right. You want to add anything else on that one?
Not really. No.
Should we go on?
Maybe.
Oh, Kevin. So this is the next one. I'm not bothering to censor these questions by reading them in advance. This might turn out to be a mistake, but so far, so the next one. Does a balanced spine have a special place or function in spirituality or on the way to enlightenment?
Balanced
I think that's
spine.
kind of one for you.
I don't know what a balanced spine is.
Well, no, but it's
like
making me think a bit. Well, I don't know. We could just say pass if we want to.
Yeah, I have no idea what a balanced spine is. Something to do with what I don't know, some sort of kundalini or chakra, but I don't know.
I was thinking of that.
Yeah, balanced energy, balance. Yeah, okay. So awakening is supposed to be easier if you have already kind of meditated or done some spiritual practice, because you know there's more balance in the system. I don't know if it's that predictable anyway. Like after awakening, it's supposed to be, if you've got trauma in the system and there's awakening, sometimes in the literature it says that things can come up. It can be really problematic. I don't know that that's always the case, certainly not from what I've come across and what I've read also. So in my own case, there was certainly a lot of chaos. I was falling apart. There was a lot of depression. There was a lot of, you know, everything was being stripped, and it went into a state of just absolute peace. Except I couldn't sleep for months. Maybe that was hard to navigate. But yeah, some people can have energetic stuff can come up, and maybe they'll have problems. Actually, I had that as well, like problems thinking, because I found it very hard to understand language actually for a while, because my mind was totally empty, but also when people spoke, I found it quite difficult sometimes to understand what they were saying. And so yeah, I find it quite difficult to focus on things and to concentrate for a long time. Actually, afterwards, reading was almost impossible, but just sitting in nature was absolutely amazing. I didn't need to do any of that. So yeah, so maybe it can. I mean, maybe if there is more psychological adjustment or more peace there beforehand, that'd be an easier course for you, because you know trauma can survive this. And sometimes maybe, you know, after awakening there can be this period of absolute peace, and then stuff maybe will start to bubble up again. So the things that you were able to kind of escape, you might have to deal with further down the line. But I've also experienced that too. So, you know, it's unpredictable actually. So, but yeah, if you're inclined towards meditation or whatever, I mean, that's great anyway. It's great for the mind. It's absolutely, you know, and so yeah, great for health. So yeah.
Yeah, all I'll add to that is because the question says, does the spine have a special function in spirituality? All I'll add is that, as far as I'm concerned, this communication here about non-duality, it's got nothing in particular to do with spirituality. I mean, it includes spirituality because it includes everything, but, you know, it has as much or as little to do with spirituality as it has to do with drinking a cup of tea. So there is nothing here particularly that says, you know, spirituality. I mean, spirituality is included because everything is included, but this is not what I would call a spiritual communication, or certainly not a spiritual message. Yeah. By the way, I mean, I'm just reading these chat questions because that's what's coming in. I mean, I assume that, you know, if anybody wants to come in live on this and sort of ask a question on screen, then there's a method for doing that via Emerson, who's working the technological magic of this evening.
You can raise your hand if you would like to ask a question, and then I'll call you. Eligio.
Hey, Emerson. Hello,
hey,
Emerson.
How's it going?
I got a question about what Mr. Sylvester just said. He said it's not about spirituality. Is that correct?
Sorry, I don't know if it's really breaking up. I had a lot of difficulty listening to that, hearing that.
Okay, sorry. You just said that this is not about spirituality. Is that right? This is not about spirituality.
Not particularly. It includes spirituality because it includes everything. So it's about spirituality. It's about drinking a cup of coffee. It's no more about spirituality than about drinking a cup of coffee.
Okay. This is not about letting go of the addiction to seeking.
Is what about letting go of the addiction to seeking?
What you're talking about. Like,
yeah, it would be if there was anyone who could let go of the addiction to seeking. I mean, the addiction to seeking is there or it isn't. I mean, I would only use the word addiction very loosely. I mean, whatever this is, this Richard was quite passionately involved in seeking for quite a long time, and then that kind of stopped. But there was nothing here that let go of that addiction or that passionate seeking. You know, it had an energy, apparently, you know, apparently it had an energy in the life of this apparent person, and then it didn't anymore. You want to?
Yeah. So So would you say something happened or nothing happened?
I'd say nothing happened. Yeah,
So
but I mean, I'm not trying to be clever here when I'd say nothing happened. I mean, I've said this before. It's like, you know, you have to hit. You don't have to, but you could hear that in two different ways. You know, nothing happened, but also nothing happened, as in nothing was seen.
because it was already.
Yeah, it was already, but this, whatever this is, maybe it's a meat robot, I don't know, but whatever this is, wasn't seeing that. Yeah, nothing was already, but this was not seeing that.
Okay.
Well, maybe just to say that, I mean, saying nothing happened. I mean, the transformation is huge. I mean, for me, the first event is nothing. Like it's a noticing, and it wasn't particularly startling to me, except that, that I thought something bad had happened. But the seeing of love is so transformational. It is an event, and it does change everything. And so to say nothing happened, like it's a massive thing. Nothing comes close to that, and you can't even imagine it. You really can't. So to say nothing happened, you know, it can make it seem like there's no change. There's massive change. And
yeah. Okay, I get it logically.
That's kind of why, you know, I say, you know, you don't have to, but you could hear that phrase in both ways. You know, nothing happened, but also nothing happened, and that is cosmic.
Yeah.
Seeing nothing happening is cosmic. See, seeing that is seeing everything arising out of nothing.
Yeah. So I think I'm ready to be a speaker because I get it logically. And I know I may not get it energetically, but I get it logically. Therefore, I'm already there because that's a logic. You see what I mean?
No.
I know.
Absolutely.
Okay.
what do you mean? You just you understand it? I mean, it's just a
conceptually. In my head, I understand it.
I mean, is there more than that? Does it resonate with you? Is there a sense of at-homeness as well with that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, there is. When you guys talk, oh yeah, it's peaceful.
Oh, all right. Okay. So something has been seen then. So it's not just logic then.
Okay.
Well, is there before? You know, can you describe a before and after then?
Yes, but
yeah.
But then that's the story. Right?
Yeah, fair enough. It's a story, but it's still valid in talking about this, you know, like
sure.
So okay, so something's been seen. So
yeah.
So seeking's ended with you then, has it?
It feels a little different today, but it could be just the mood I'm in.
What way today? Can you say more? Or?
Yeah. Like okay, like I couldn't figure out the concept of nothing is happening. Nothing happens. Nothing is happening now. And the reason is because thinking that something is happening is an observer noticing something happen. So that's why there's nothing happening, because there's no one here.
Right.
Correct? Or that's what you asked me a question.
I'm getting caught up in your kind of mind stuff. Like okay. Okay, so I don't know.
But I do notice something happening at the same time. Like it's real.
Okay, yeah, the observer thing. I mean, often that's an idea as well. I mean,
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I got to drop that idea, or not be that observer.
Or maybe
I understand that.
You might just come to not worry about that. That there's, you know, I think after this happens, sometimes there's an awful lot of this shouldn't be there, or you know, like trying to verify that. Is that what's happening for you? Do you find it difficult to sort of own it, or?
Yeah, I find it difficult to own it because sometimes I don't like the speakers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I think that's a natural thing. You know, you'll watch these speakers and you'll think, oh God, they emphasize a certain thing, and well, it's not like that, or you know, I think that's a phase. You know, you'll just go through that and you'll go up and down with it, and then you won't give it a rat's, like, you know.
You're right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm feeling that falling away too. Like, okay, that's his tick or whatever. It's fine.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then I take what I want and leave the rest, basically.
Right. That sounds good.
Okay, I think I got it, or not got it, but thank you for answering my questions. Thank you.
Yes. There's another hand up there I can see.
Oh, really?
Go ahead, Howard.
Hey, you guys.
Hi.
Hi.
Honored to speak with you, Richard, and both of you, actually. I was wondering, this might be a basic question for you, Richard, but does time and space exist?
Does time and space exist? Yes and no. Yeah, yes and no. One of the shocks, I think, of what I call an event, an awakening event or whatever, is the recognition that, I don't know, I'll put it in an absolute way for now, you know, that there is no time or space. There is only this. We could call it now if we like. That's a little bit confusing, but there is only this, in which everything is apparently arising. So everything is apparently arising kind of implies space, and yet somehow it's seen that, you know, there is no space, because when this collapses, then I'm going to use slightly misleading words here. Awareness, perception, whatever you want to call it, seeing is everywhere. And because it's everywhere, there isn't any everywhere. You know, if this is equal, if we deal in here and there, if this is equally here and there, then here and there collapse, they disappear. So there's no space. And if everything is, a word that's just popped into my head, it's a bit pompous, but I'd use it. If everything is co-eternal, then there's no past or future. There is simply this, so there's no time. Right? And what I'm saying is that this can clearly be seen. It's probably equally clear from what I'm stammering my way through here now. It can clearly be seen, but equally clearly it cannot really be described. It certainly can't be put into ideas or words. But so in a way, you know, we kind of either have to take that as read or not, you know, throw it out or let it in, it doesn't really matter. But the other thing that I would say is that as long as physical death has not occurred, the character, I mean, I'm going back to the meat robot now, you know, Richard the character, as long as that continues to exist, clearly exists in time. Or I could say clearly, it'd be much more accurate to say clearly exists in the appearance of time. So sitting here, it's completely obvious that there is just this. There is just this. I mean, one of the contentions I make is that this can not just be seen, but also in a way, it can also be fairly obvious to the mind. Not that that matters.
Yes, sir.
But it is quite obvious that there is just this. There's no past, there's no future, there is no time. And also, this is a character who lives in time. You know, there's a memory here of having gone down to the shops this morning to buy some food for this evening. There's an expectation that supper will be cooked tonight. So the character absolutely lives in time.
I agree.
If there's ever, I'll just finish this, if there is ever a case, and there probably are, if there's ever a case of characters, you know, who don't live in time at all, they won't be functioning in anything like a practical or normal way. You know, any character who does not live in time will probably be in full-time care.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I agree. Yes, in principle, sure. Yes, you do and you don't. But what do you think that means for a brain, a physical brain that exists in time and space? Do you think you think?
I've no idea what it means for a physical brain.
if time and space is not actual, and
Yeah.
there's not a physical brain that actually is producing consciousness, then do you think?
Oh, that was do I think?
Do you
Well,
think?
Oh, no,
Okay.
absolutely not. How can I or you think? There is no I and there is no you, but thinking nevertheless happens. In other words, thinking, in other words, the appearance. I'll keep this very simple in terms of thinking. I'll ignore other forms of perception other than, what we normally think of as thought. So there is a stream there's a thought stream, if you like. Sometimes it may be a very energized thought stream. Sometimes it might be quite a low energy of thought stream. Sometimes it may not be there at all. Clearly, it's not there at all in dreamless sleep. So there is, if you like, a process. We talk about the mind. We could say, well, the mind is also simply a process. There's no thing, the mind, but there is a process of thinking and other perceptions, feeling, sensing, and so forth.
Could
Flow.
consciousness,
If you like, there's only flow. There's no objects. There is only flow. Or another way of putting this is there's no objects. There's only process.
ooh, that's
Mind
nice.
is
I
a
like that.
process.
Yeah, I like that. And in regards to mind, if because we're not individuals, we don't exist as identities. So, and we're not thinking. It's not, the stream is not yours. So it just kind of goes as like you said, just like a process of self, and in the illusion of consciousness. In that consciousness itself is the illusion of separation. You know what I mean? Consciousness in time is the illusion of a self observing other. I don't know what you think about that. Consciousness itself is the illusion of separation.
Say that last bit again.
Consciousness itself is the illusion of separation. It's the illusion of a self observing other.
I think the reason I got lost is because I don't know what consciousness is, and
Yeah.
I'm not remotely convinced that anybody else knows what consciousness is either. And the more I listen to learned people talking about consciousness, I don't spend a lot of time doing that, but I spend a little bit of time doing that. And the more I listen to people talking about consciousness, the more, I want to say convinced, but perhaps I should just say suspicious I become that nobody knows what the hell they're talking about. There was I have quoted this before, but indulge me. There was an encyclopedia of psychology. I think it was about in the 90s, the 80s or the 90s, and under the entry for consciousness, the compiler in the encyclopedia simply gave an extremely simple one-sentence description of it, and then underneath that just put nothing worth reading has ever been written about this. And now in 2021, I'm inclined to add to that, and nothing worth saying has ever been said about it. And one of the things that I noticed is that there are people out there who are, it's like their speciality. Consciousness really is their speciality. And when two of them get together, it's pretty obvious after 4 minutes, they cannot agree what it is they're talking about. Now, if you and I were greengrocers and we got together and we couldn't agree what we were talking about when it came to apples, that would probably give rise to some suspicion in other people about whether we really were greengrocers. I don't know if that metaphor worked, but if not, forget it. Do you want to be on consciousness here?
Well,
possibly not.
Well, thank you for the time. And what I meant by consciousness, if I can have 30 more seconds, what I meant by consciousness is, if you are conscious that you are a self, and then obviously you're aware of other things. So you're consciously aware that, you're separate. And that's all I meant by it. But anyways, thank you for the time, and I appreciate it. You guys have a great day.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to try one last thing here. I'm just going to say, try replacing any idea or thought or language about consciousness with just experience. It doesn't, there is experience. I'm going to claim that that is irredeemably known. If somebody wants to come onto this show and argue that with me, you're welcome to. But until that happens, I'm just going to claim that, there is experience. That is known. That's the only thing that's known. To say that experience arises in consciousness, or we can become aware of consciousness, adds nothing to that. It doesn't add anything to the simple sentence.
Could you expand on what is experienced and who is experiencing it?
Say that again?
I mean, respectfully, could you expand on what is experienced and who is experiencing it?
I can't expand on the first part of that. I would say experience is self-evident and there's nothing else to be said about it. Who is experiencing it? No one's experiencing it. The sensation of separation is that I am experiencing my experiences. What we're talking about this evening is the possibility of that sensation, if you like, collapsing, and then there is simply
that which is experienced
without the need for an experiencer.
I think I heard somebody say that the other day. That which is experienced. But thank you so much. You guys are great.
I can see some.
Thank
more.
you so much, Howard. I have a couple more questions here that are written. Want me to read it to you, Richard? And then we'll go to William, and then we'll go to John.
Yeah, read them out. Yeah.
All right. If we are in a dream, who is the dreamer? How can you tell that this is a dream?
Do you want to go to that one? Or not?
Well, it's not a dream. It's nothing like a dream. So it's just that, the end of the illusion of self doesn't make it dreamlike. It's just. It seemed to be. It just changes the quality of experience in a way, because it's seen that there's absolutely nothing, and that continues and stuff arising, but it's in a sense it's more real and it's real and unreal. It's nothing like dreamlike. So I can't. Yeah, dream it's got much more reality to it than the previous identification experience of identified life. This is much more real and totally unreal at the same time. So I don't know. That's how I experience it. I might turn the heating down because
I've used the metaphor. I've probably used it this evening. In fact, that this is a dreamed character, but that's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for the recognition that this is not. This character does not have the reality that it always believed it had until that sense of self dropped away. And in those terms, who is the dreamer? Well, there is no dreamer. We could say oneness is the dreamer if you like, but that's a bit suspect because, again, it's just language, but we're personifying oneness. There is no dreamer. There is no dream. There is just what's happening. But talking about it as a dream is a way of trying to explain certain aspects. And also, how can you tell that this is a dream? That's the third part of this question. You cannot tell that this is a dream. Of course you can't. But when you're not there, then, well, it's another metaphor. When you're not there, then this is seen through. What does that mean? It means that the belief or the apprehension that there are two things here, there's the world and there's me experiencing the world, that collapses. So that apprehension is seen through. It's seen through that, if you like, that was always a story, another metaphor, that was always a dream, again, a metaphor.
And it's somatic as well, because it's felt differently. So it's felt like there's nothing here. There's a weightlessness to the body. It's real in the sensory experience of this. It's there's nothing, and it's known as well. So it's known beyond the mind too, and in the event, it can be visually seen. So there's a visual component to this, like an illumination as well. So it's, you know, it's very clear, and the ongoing experience of that, it's just known, and it's very hard to say how that's known, but it's very, very clear that this is just utterly unreal, and yet appearing at the same time, real at the same time. So it's, yeah. It's strange, yeah.
That reminds me of another way in which I use the word dream, you know, in a way as a kind of metaphor, and that's the idea of a nighttime dream. You know, I mean, we all know what it is to experience a completely different reality to this waking dream, if we call it that. We all know what it's like to experience a completely different reality, and that other reality is utterly and totally convincing until it isn't, and that's in a nighttime dream. So, speaking conventionally, we go to sleep, there is a dream. In that dream, there is, if you like, a me who is a dream character, but that is totally real. It's completely real. You know, unless there's a kind of waking up in the dream, which, you know, so I'm not going to talk about here. So a kind of normal level of dreaming, it's completely real until it ends. And when it ends, it's seen to be completely unreal. So that's just a kind of, you know, it's just a metaphor really to try to bring to life through words something about this when it's really impossible to bring it to life through words. Yeah.
Maybe lucid dreaming can give you a bit more of a flavor of that, because you're waking up in the dream knowing you're dreaming, so you're aware of that. I mean, it's not, at the same time, it's nothing like that, because when you wake up in the dream, you know, you can reinvent the dream. Sometimes, if you're lucky in a lucid dream, you can, I want to be in this environment, then maybe that will happen. So you can change the whole scene of the dream, the whole story of the dream sometimes. But yeah, so it's an interesting one as well. So, but it's, yes, it's not quite the same as this. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. There's a couple more comments here, and then we'll go to William and then John Luna. Angela goes, I love this format with you too. It's like a 2-for-1 deal for nobody. And there's another comment here from Ray. I love your quotes interview, and I am wondering if you're going to have a part 2 coming up soon. That interview actually gave me a glimpse, and I have been hooked on watching you and also Emerson's interview with other speakers. Thank you. I was skeptical about this message until that video, because I used to hold on to those quotes quite dearly.
Cool.
It's great.
Yeah.
William, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi again. I've got a question. Richard, I watched a video of you from a while back where you were saying that the seeing of liberation can happen under there's no circumstance necessary, in as much as somebody could be doing spiritual practice and it could be seen or not. Somebody else could be cycling down the country road and it could be seen or not. So it's just because I'm really fascinated with this uncompromising non-dual message, maybe obsessed with it, and I can't get enough of it. But is it so? It's just as likely somebody might never come across this communication and just be involved in a dualistic teaching, and still there's the dropping away of the sense of self.
The reason I'm not answering immediately is because I'm just hovering over that phrase, just as likely, and I want to take that out of the question in a way, because I think that simply can't be known, you know, that sort of just as likely. So take that out, and I would say, yeah, this seeing, I think, yeah, I mean, if you like, the evidence is, but certainly also there's a kind of, I think, a direct apprehension of that, yeah, this can arise, you know, if you like, anytime, anywhere, for anyone. Yeah.
Could I add, from like Steve Taylor's, he researches this, I think he's a senior lecturer at Leeds University. Maybe it's not Leeds. Anyways, it seems to be that pain, suffering is the biggest kind of, you know, opener to this, you know, grief, you know, shock, trauma is the biggest, you know, known from his own study. He did a PhD as well. He studied 25 people, and 5 of them woke up in therapy actually. But I think because they were going into their, he said, going into their trauma stuff. So it's pain is certainly often in the story before awakening.
Okay.
Which isn't the path, obviously, but you know, extreme pain, extreme suffering.
There
are
commonalities that he know. Sorry.
Can I kind of wind it back a little bit as well, and just throw in, of course, another thing to recognise. I mean, obviously, no one is going to set up the idea that a path to liberation is to engage in extreme suffering until one becomes near suicidal. Well, actually, having said that, of course, if I think of some of the religious traditions with their flagellation and self-torture, they might get pretty close to that anyway, but kind of forget that. But to wind it back a little bit also, let's remember also, suffering arises or it doesn't. Extreme suffering arises or it doesn't. Suicidal feelings arise or they don't. In other words, whatever we feel about whether there's a path that might get me to this, excuse the language there, whatever we feel about whether there is or whether there isn't, we can roll it back one stage, if you like, and again, and recognize, but there is nobody who is, if you like, choosing to take that line or have that attitude. So in other words, if I go and sit at the foot of the master and meditate for some years, which I have done, and very enjoyable it was as well, but there was nobody who chose to do that. That was again something that apparently happened in this dream of a character called Richard, who seems to have a past.
Yeah, I guess the reason I've realised the reason I asked the question was because I have a fear that I need to do the right things, because if I do the wrong things, it will prevent this. But you've clearly just said there's no one choosing anyway, so it's almost like I can't get it wrong.
Oh, absolutely. You definitely cannot get it wrong. Yeah. You can't get it right either.
But you'll probably still try to get it right, because that's what happens. Yeah. Like it's
without
impossible.
Question. That's great. It was worth asking that question. Thank you.
As long as there's someone there, again, I'm sorry to be tautological. As long as there's someone there trying to understand, then there's someone there trying to understand. Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I've been asked for advice quite a lot over the years, and of course I have no advice to give, but I usually end up saying, sometimes in a state of kind of some despair myself, if it's possible to relax, then just relax. And one of the things in a way that you're raising there and that Dawn's commenting there is the shoulds and oughts in the mind. The shoulds and oughts in the mind that does not actually exist. Am I doing this right? Should I be doing something different? Should I be meditating for longer or doing a different kind of meditation? I mean, as long as that's there, that's there. But if there's any opportunity to just relax and tell those thoughts to fuck off, then that's quite, I'm just going to say that's quite relaxing, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I find your story fascinating, Richard, because about all the seeking you did, because I've never been involved in any practices. I've read a few books on spirituality over the years, but then I always got put off by the practicing because I was always too lazy. I'd read the book and then I'd get to the bit of the practice and I'd think, skip that, read the next. But then when I came across this message and it was clearly like non-prescriptive, I just thought, oh, this is great. I'm not being told to do anything. Like, it resonated in that way.
Well, I don't want to start, set off more searching here, but I will throw in that there are practices out there which you can do in a very, very lazy way. And I'm saying nothing more about that. Those were the sorts of practices I was attracted to, the really lazy ones. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, that's great. Thank you both.
Go ahead, John.
Hi, how you doing, Richard and Dawn? You guys are great. You know, Richard, I read your book, The Book of No One, and then I saw you had another one, I Hope You Die Soon. And I just thought it was funny because over here, it just feels like, I don't think you would have named the book, I Hope You Die Slowly. So it just feels like that's kind of been the journey here. And every time there's a feeling of this clarity and seems self-evident, and then something happens in life that kind of overwhelms it. And then I'm feeling, oh, that's just feels a million miles away. So I know the only thing that would want to anything to die or the ego to collapse is the ego. So I don't know how do I view this as someone who's sort of been in this for a while and has, oscillating in and out of clarity, it's seemingly anyway. And, obviously there's a desire for this to, come to rest. And just that dilemma, because there's a desire and that pushes me into action, but then there's the desire is for rest. And so I'm kind of just, I guess that's where the mind maybe can collapse, but maybe you can help me a little bit. I think this, and I don't want to be too confusing, but I think you get me.
Shall I go for that? Yeah. I wish I could. I say that although this is indescribable, the closest experience that gets to it, if you like, is relaxation. And I often quote, I think it's Kenneth Dowman wrote, relaxation is the key to Buddhahood right here, right now, which I think really gets the spirit of this. But it's quite clear in a way, there's no advice I can give. I did long ago come up with a mantra. I was actually sitting in a talk by another speaker, Nathan Gill, this is many years ago, and it kind of was suddenly blurted out of my mouth as if by the word, by the sound of God or whatever. This mantra came to me as I was sitting there, and it was hopeless, helpless, meaningless. It is hopeless, we are helpless, it is meaningless. And it just leapt out of me into the meeting. And then in the tea break, somebody came up to me, somebody I knew faintly, put their arm around my shoulder and said, "Richard, that was the most depressing thing I've ever heard anybody say." And I turned around and kind of automatically started to apologize to them. And they said, no, it was great. It's great. There's something in that. In a way, this may sound light-hearted. In another way, it isn't. There is something in there quite serious that I'm trying to get at. And the phrase that comes to me, it's about letting go. We can't let go ourselves, of course, but somehow, if there is a recognition that, we are helpless, that's not the right way to put it, because we're not really helpless. It's just that we don't exist. But just kind of play along with the language for the sake of this. If there's a recognition of, let's call it helplessness here, there really isn't anything that can be done about this here that might produce a little bit of relaxation, a little bit of release of tension, right? If it's also recognized that my case is hopeless in that sense, there isn't anything that I can do about my dilemma, because there isn't a me that exists that can take action, however much it seems as if there is. So in that sense, it may be recognized that, not only I am hopeless, but this situation, that I am helpless, but this situation is hopeless. Maybe that might produce some more relaxation. It may not, but maybe it might. And then the last piece of that is, if it is recognized that this is all completely meaningless, it's not going anywhere, there's no great story that has to be fulfilled, I'm not on a path to the heavens in a way where I have to please God in some way. I have to watch my every deed and my every word and make sure that I don't say fuck occasionally because it might annoy the Almighty or the Buddhist angels or whatever it might be. This is absolutely meaningless. It is without meaningless. Now that can be heard. It can be heard by some minds with despair, but that's not how it's meant, and it can be heard with a huge sigh of relief. Again, relaxation. Oh my God, the realization that this is meaningless, and all those Hail Marys, those 300 Hail Marys I had to do before breakfast, and then the 15 minutes beating of myself with the cat o' nine tails after lunch. None of that was necessary, because none of that was going anywhere or getting me anywhere. There's no God to please.
Yeah.
There's nothing to be fulfilled. This is already whole and entire. Well, just that. This is already whole and entire. It's not going anywhere, and it doesn't have any meaning, and it doesn't need to have any meaning, because it's whole and entire in itself. So somehow, if there's even an apprehension of some of that, even just on a mind level, that can produce some relaxation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, John. There's a whole bunch of questions here. This one is from Lori999. What are insights? What is sudden understanding? Are those part of the story? Thank you.
Insights. Well, you can have energetic illuminations of aspects of awakening, for sure. What are they? I don't know. That's a, yeah, before awakening, certainly some people, yeah, like I've done myself, you can understand an aspect of this, but it's not the same as awakening. So it can be like a partial awakening. And certainly you can have partial glimpses in a meditation as well. But like, so seeing, in my own case, when I saw that everyone was awake, and then seeing the veils, seeing the Buddha nature of everyone. So they're visual. When I woke up, actually in the morning before I woke up, I looked in the mirror and I saw my child self look at me, and as if it, it wasn't like that, it was that. And it's so almost like a sort of indication of a return to innocence or whatever, but it seemed to convey something of this to me, some aspect of it. And as the day went on, I seemed to have illuminations of different aspects before the self fell away completely and love was seen. So these things do happen as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I would say, insight and understanding is of the mind. But what I wanted to add is that, again, it's fairly common. I mean, this happened here, and I talked to quite a few other people where it's happened, that even just a split second seeing of what we're talking about here can then produce a lot of kind of mental understanding, a lot of mental insight afterwards. There's a kind of natural energetic thing, not in the sense that the mind worries at it or works at it in any way, but just kind of things seem to spring up. So for example, here, a lot of things, I mean, there are a lot of sayings and stories in Zen, which to my mind, when I had a mind, very puzzling indeed. Like, what the hell do these, what the hell is going on here? What are these monks talking about? And there's something about, as I say, even just a sort of split second seeing of this, and suddenly it becomes clear when it's, just with that kind of recognition of, oh, as I say, it might just be for half a second, but that recognition, oh, there really is no one here. That's not a metaphor, it's not a kind of image, it's not a kind of romantic or flowery way of talking about something spiritual. It is quite literally a description. Oh, there really is nothing here. And then some of those kind of Zen sayings and other strange ideas that mystics tend to come out with, not spiritual teachers. I mean, spiritual teachers tend to talk in terms which we can kind of understand with the mind, but mystics tend to come out with things which sound totally, just like, what the hell can possibly be meant by that? And then just that split second recognition there really isn't anyone here. And then oh yeah, that's what that meant. That's what that meant. That's what that Zen teacher was trying to get at, or whatever it might be.
And sometimes it could be like around when awakening happens, there may be an accompanying voice, and it's often said like a voice saying this is what you've been running from your whole life. Or in like in Eckhart Tolle's case, he saw an image of a diamond or something that almost like an indication this is what's happened, you know, like it, so that there's that energetic stuff that happens around it, almost like verifying the experience as the identification falls away. So yeah, there's that as well. There's sort of wisdom that's not impersonal wisdom, if you like.
Yes, it's like somehow the self disappearing makes a space for impersonal wisdom to just come flooding in, right? Which can then produce the kind of insight that I was talking about. I mean, one example, I mean, I've quoted this many a time, my favorite Christian mystic from about the 14th century, who said, until I see that I am nothing, I cannot see that I am everything. And so the seeking Richard, going to gurus and meditating and so forth, puzzles over, what the hell can that mean? What on earth can that possibly mean? But then the moment this collapses, it's like, oh, yeah, of course, I am nothing. You know, it wasn't a metaphor, it wasn't an image. She wasn't trying to say something poetic. She was simply describing something as literally as she possibly could. Oh, of course, yeah, I am nothing. Until that's seen, it can't be seen that I am also everything.
There's a question here from Saket G. How can today exist without yesterday? If we didn't have food yesterday, wouldn't we be hungry today? Doesn't this validate the existence of a past?
You want to go for that?
Well, yeah, if you didn't have food yesterday, you'd probably be starving or not. Yeah. Well, it past exists and time exists and doesn't exist. Your relationship to that changes phenomenally. I mean, on an experiential level, time is, you know, when someone is with, I don't know, when you're with somebody, you're very much more present with them. And when they leave, they're very much more absent than they ever were. So that reality is restored to what's actually happening. And when someone disappears or something changes, it's very much left behind. It's very much, it kind of dissolves. So there's very little reality to that. But yeah, I mean, if you don't eat, you're going to feel the effects of that. So it exists and it doesn't exist. But yeah, it's very light. I guess that's why boredom is rarely experienced, rarely if ever, because the sting of time is taken out because everything is okay as it is. Whatever's occurring is fine. So
yeah, time is both real and unreal. As I've said, it's unreal in an absolute sense, but the character lives in time. It's real in that sense. It's real to the character. And if you're ever with a non-duality speaker who simply says, well, time is unreal, there is no such thing as time, and leaves it at that and won't say anything else about it, I suggest that if it's a live meeting, which we may have again one day, you could rush the stage, debag them, search for their wallet in their trouser pockets and triumphantly produce from it their return ticket to Brighton or wherever it was they came from. I mean, of course, for the character, time exists.
And as Tim Freak said, you couldn't even understand a conversation without time. So, you know, time is necessary to make sense of things too. So
it's, I mean, I've not come across many cases where there's been this seeing of non-duality and then the one who has seen it starves to death because they have a failure to feed themselves after that. I mean, if it happens, it doesn't seem to happen very often.
And I think we have the last question here from Jack Saturday. Is knowledge all memory and memory all past and past non-existent so that there is finally no knowledge?
Ouch, I didn't understand that. Is it on here?
Yes,
look,
it is.
You can read it ourselves. That's very complicated. Can you read that? Is knowledge all memory and memory all past and past non-existent so that there is finally no No, did you say that was the last question, Emerson?
That's right. Yeah. Mhm.
Maybe we might be able to get away with not answering it, then I don't know. I mean, it's so abstract to me. It's so abstract that nothing is coming. Do you want to have a go?
Well, knowledge is of the mind. It's all conditioned, isn't it? And knowing, the seeing of non-duality is beyond the mind. It's beyond that. It's the end of knowledge in a sense. So it's seeing through knowledge. It's, you know, takes you beyond that. So there's just nothing. And that is seen. I don't know. Does that answer? It doesn't answer the question. Does
It's
it?
pretty good stuff.
And yeah, no.
If I don't know if this will work if I relate this to the last question, what I was saying about time both existing, both being unreal and real, that in a sense, I mean, absolutely, I would say a sense that knowledge is overthrown by seeing this. Yeah, knowledge, you know, what the mind thinks it knows, particularly about meaning, you know, life, meaning, path, purpose, what God wants me to do and all of that sort of thing. Certainly, I would say in that way, knowledge is completely overthrown by this. On the other hand, of course, in another way, knowledge continues. You know, if you know, I know where the fridge is, and I intend to be traveling to it fairly soon. And I know the route there as well. And without that, we'd be back to starvation, which was what I think the last question was about.
Yeah, and you don't need the mind for that, because yeah, so it's all known anyway. So yeah, the mind is overrated.
Oh yes, the mind's definitely overrated. Yeah, yeah.
It appears that there's another question that popped in at the last couple of minutes from McCrad. From your perspective, what do you think of this seeming intention, not from any self or ego, but of the whole of life, i.e. evolution, procreation, the happening seems to have an inherent intention? It's the final Jeopardy question there, so.
Yes, it seems to. There's no doubt that it seems to the mind, yeah. This seeming intention, yeah. It's great for creating stories about meaning and cosmic consciousness and all sorts of wonderful things, but essentially there is what's happening, and in what's happening, stories about intention and evolution appear.
Yeah, because in the story, yeah, it seems it's very easy to posit an intention, because life does seem to tend towards greater and greater complexity and greater consciousness as well, certainly in our case. So it's very easy to, yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe there is like an intention. I certainly wouldn't know of it, but yeah. So
we could add to this long list of what we are, starting with meat robots. We are meaning making machines. We are meaning seeking missiles, in fact. I mean, I won't start going on at length about this now, as it's late and also it's not strictly relevant, but I mean, from an evolutionary perspective, if you like, from the perspective of evolutionary psychology, I mean, seeking meaning, you know, seeking patterns, which is basically seeking meaning, is absolutely fundamental to our psyche. Somebody mentioned the brain earlier. I have no idea whether brains do or do not exist, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but if they do exist, they're certainly very, very good at seeking meaning. So yeah, that's just something that the separated person not only does, but it seems to have considerable survival value as well. Yeah, if you didn't see pattern and meaning in, you know, the glimpses of the tiger's flank as it crept up on you, you would be eaten very, very quickly.
yeah.
Well, oh, somebody's just written meaning-seeking missiles, great for a T-shirt. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's market those. Yeah.
And who knows? Who knows anyway?
Yeah, who knows anyway?
Maybe. Who knows?
Well, thank you so much, Dawn and Richard. Everybody unmute yourself and say bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You can go to Richard's website. Also, Dawn, you have a website? RichardSylvester.com. All right. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Emerson.
Cheers,
Bye.
Emerson.
Thank you, Emerson. Thank you, Richard and Dawn.
Bye.